Jerry, are we ready? Everybody? Good morning and welcome to the Historic Site Preservation Board, City of Palm Springs, California, Tuesday, May 8th, 2016. May we have the roll call, please?
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Yes. Member Marsh?
Here.
Member Kaiser?
Here.
Member Dixon?
Present.
Member Lavoie?
Here.
Member Hayes?
Here.
Vice Chair Burkett?
Here.
Chair Johns?
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. And report on the posting of the agenda, please, Ken.
The agenda for this meeting was posted for public review at the City Hall Bulletin Board on the west side of the Council Chamber and at the Planning Services Counter in accordance with applicable law.
All right, and can I have a motion on the acceptance of the agenda as submitted?
Second.
Do you have that, Ken?
Yep.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Anyone opposed? All right, excellent. Ladies and gentlemen of the audience, this time has been set aside for members of the public to address the Historic Site Preservation Board on agenda items and items of general interest within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board. Although the Historic Site Preservation Board values your comments pursuant to the Brown Act, it generally cannot take any action on items not listed on the posted agenda. There will be 3 minutes assigned for each speaker. Testimony for public hearings will be taken at the time of the hearing. We do not have a public hearing on our agenda today, so this will be the only opportunity for members of the audience to address the board. I will open the public comments and welcome anyone to come forward to speak. Please come forward. Yeah, welcome. Good morning. Please introduce yourself.
My name is Jeffrey Bernstein. I'm the owner of Destination PSP at 170 North Palm Canyon at the Town and Country. Thank you very much for hearing my comments again. I previously noted our full support for the painting, minor repairs, and ultimate restoration of the Town and Country. We've been pushing for this for a very long time, so we're very happy about it. But I also expressed our concerns regarding the awning, signage, and lighting as they impact our business. The new awnings as proposed appear well-designed and appropriate to the building. However, I would ask that the existing awnings not be removed until the new ones are installed. The sun glare and heat load for the better part of the day will be impossible to manage. We're also very concerned that the proposed awning signage, which is 8 inches high by 5 feet long, is extremely limiting. At the face of the awning, this is virtually impossible for pedestrians to see being overhead and equally difficult to see from passing vehicles or across the street. It may be that blade signage or larger illuminated signage on the building could become part of an approved signage program, but at this point only the awning sign is addressed, and this is considerably less than signage that's even the current code allows. My goal today is to help move the process along and not delay anything, but ensure that it is contingent upon not just an approved sign program, but a sign program that ensures the viability of a business in the center. Past images of stores on Palm Canyon, including the Town and Country, include large business signs, and I have images if I'm allowed to pass them around. While historical, this is consistent with the very large new signage in place across businesses across the street, such as Starbucks, H&M, Tommy Bahama, etc. The new signage includes eliminated building signage, awning signage, as well as blade signage. We believe new building signage designed for the Town and Country can respect the history of the buildings while still supporting the businesses they serve without being limited to the face of the awning. You may also note that historical images show a large dimensional sign on the west facade of the building for the center that could now be adapted for resident businesses. I would also ask that this exterior building lighting be considered. Removal of the non-original wall bracket lights is not an issue. However, at present, the Town and Country is largely vacant, and we understand that it may take time to reoccupy. In the meantime, the area to the side and rear courtyard is dark, uninviting, and even unsafe at night. We would hope that an appropriate exterior lighting plan would be included as part of the restoration, such as we saw at the Architecture and Design Museum. In order to restore and reuse the center as a viable commercial entity, we hope the board will recognize that the success of the occupying businesses are dependent on more than just an architecturally preserved building and an equally important part of the equation. Lastly, I want to point out that historically there was pedestrian traffic throughout the Town and Country Center because there were stores and restaurants in the courtyard. There was an attractive courtyard and the access paths were clear. We know it will take several years for the Town and Country to be restored. During that period, the current merchants will not have any of those advantages. So once again, we rely on signage and lighting. Our goal, again, is not to delay the process or throw up any obstacles or dispute in any way the importance of restoring the Town and Country Center. Our goal is to ensure that the current merchants survive and that the building is restored to one that works for 21st century merchants and is an attraction for our residents and tourists. If the focus is not on showing its viability as a multi-tenant commercial property, then we run the danger of it becoming vacant once again. So I ask that if any signage, lighting, or awnings are not be removed without an immediate approved replacement in place. That's it. Thank you.
Jeffrey, have you shared
Yes.
your comments with your landlord?
I have not, but I will. I think he said last time it was up to the board and the preservation people, so. I think they're,
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
oh.
All right,
I may-
all right, Jeffrey, thank you very much.
Yes, I did. Thank you.
Our next speaker, please, welcome, good morning, and please introduce yourself.
Good morning. My name is Stephen Price. I am a member of the Board of Directors of Palm Springs Preservation Foundation, and I'm here. This is my first HSPB meeting. Very excited.
Thank you.
I can only find my glasses. I'm here to just give you a bit of news, actually. At the last board meeting of PSPF,
Let's put this aside for now. Yeah. No,
we,
please, go ahead.
we authorized, the board voted to authorize a grant in the amount of $7,500 to go to the Cornelia White House reconstruction documentary project. My understanding is that's roughly half the budget. It's being produced and directed by Bert Simonis, and so we thought it was the right thing to do for us to step up and build a rallying point. We're very excited about the time-lapse feature. That's one of the ideas that is in the script. From start to finish, it's a true documentary. There'll be interviews with some of the people involved with it. I'm hoping that this is a good thing, and I just wanted to let you know that we are behind this, and hope that other organizations and persons come forward as well.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else in the audience wishing to address the board this morning? Please come forward. Good morning, welcome, and please introduce yourself.
Good morning. My name is Jade Nelson, resident of Palm Springs for 42 years. You'll have to forgive me. I only have use of one hearing aid today, so I haven't been able to hear what the other speakers have said. So forgive me if I repeat anything that's been said. I just wanted to say that I've done a little bit of research on Hiram Hudson Benedict in the small amount of time that I had yesterday. So I've just printed out several articles that do show that, in fact, he did design the Dalville Wilson House in question on Camino Norte. So I've printed these out for you. Unfortunately, there's only one copy of each at this time, but I've highlighted the important bits, and also a wonderful article from the Arizona Republic in February 1962 that talks a little bit about his life and background and his work as an architect. And it's kind of small, but there's one section that I've highlighted that will tell you about how long he lived in Palm Springs and had an office here, which was almost 30 years.
Jade, I'm sorry, I missed who you are referencing. What is this?
Hiram Hudson Benedict, the architect of the house that you have before you under item 4A.
Okay, that's all I needed. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm with you.
So I'll just hand those over. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much. Anyone else in the audience wishing to address the board this morning? Are you actually coming forward? No, all right. Seeing no other members of the audience wishing to address the board this morning, we will close the public comment. First item on our agenda is our consent calendar, and it is the approval of the minutes. And we have minutes from April 10th, 2018, which was our last meeting, and we have had submitted to us minutes from July 11th of 2017. Did we somehow not have these minutes submitted to us before?
That is correct, and that's
Okay.
why they're here before you today. As part of Mr. Lyon's work on the CLG report that we have to submit every year, we realized that we were deficient in getting the July minutes to you for approval.
Okay, I certainly understand that. Has everyone had a chance to review their minutes? Let's talk about the July 11th, 2017 minutes first. Linda?
I will be recusing myself since I wasn't at either one of those meetings.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lavoy?
Mr. Chair, there's only one typo that I saw. It was on page 6, at the bottom. Your comment, it should be 2 hour instead of 2 your.
Okay, got that. Ken, do you see that?
No, I was looking for.
The word your should be our, H-O-U-R.
At the bottom of the page. Second line up.
Are you on the July minutes?
Yes.
July 11th, page 6 of 6. So, you know what, I'm not finding that little note. All right, so it's on the, I'm sorry, bottom of page 5 of 6. All right.
I
So-
have it.
Okay, so I had a couple of corrections also, and Ken, it is also just a typo on page 2 of 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The 6th paragraph down, Alex Dethier. Do you see that?
Yes.
It's Dethier, and not, you know, I think that's just something I happen
Thank
to
you.
know. Moving over to page 5 of 6, I just wanted to make a comment. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Again, the 6th paragraph. Member Burkett suggested future discussion or study session on proposed changes in the ordinance regarding demolition. So this is just to sort of illustrate and remind me how long this discussion has been taking place. And I think we're actually having some further discussion about this today, so coming full circle. So not necessarily an edit there. The next next third paragraph down, Chair Johns asked further about the public hearing policies. Further into that paragraph, again, no edit here, more of a comment. Again, we did discuss this demolition process and how it is allowing, certainly legally and within our ordinance, folks to eliminate properties and by leaving the requisite amount of walls. So again, this is from July 11th of 2017. So it is certainly something that we have been talking about for a while. And also page 6 of 6, at the very top of that page, again, a comment. Mr. Marsh asked about the Racquet Club Class 1 nominations. Site visits would be ordered, and yes, so we have just recently had our site visits at the Racquet Club. So again, just showing progression from what our board talks about, you know, last summer and how it's all coming to fruition now. So sometimes it takes a little longer, but I appreciate the July 11th meeting minutes for reminding me of all that. Flynn, did you have something?
No.
Okay, I'll accept a motion to accept those minutes as amended.
Second on the motion.
Okay, did we get a first?
You have it first.
Okay, so yes, you got that, Ken?
I have it, yes, thank
Okay,
you.
thank you. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, thank you. All right, let's look at the April 10th minutes, last month's meeting. I have quite a few comments and a few changes, so I'll ask anybody else on the board to, if you've looked at your minutes, what changes or edits you might have found. All right. Ken, I will go on, oh, this was terrific. At our meeting, when we talked about the LGBT community and the Section 14 additions to the Historic Resource Survey, we talked about a particular church, and this church was on Rosa Parks Boulevard. It's the Our Lady of Guadalupe Church. And it was of note because it was designed by Howard Lapham. And for most of the board, we were unfamiliar that this had been a Lapham building. And Ken, to your credit, as you followed up on that meeting with us, you did send out a great picture of that church, and it is still extant. If you've not seen this, I'm happy to pass it around. So thank you for following up on that. A heretofore unknown Howard Lapham church, well included in our historic resource survey now. I'd like to also comment on page 3 of 9 of the April minutes. It was item 4B. This is the board's approval of the new French bistro going into La Plaza. And I'd like to mention that I think really the board did an excellent job on this. All board members participated in this discussion, and I would remind the board that we allowed the French door installation on the building to better service the restaurant, but we did also condition that the exhaust fan be concealed in an appropriate architectural feature, and that the original doors to the property be maintained. So I think this was awfully good work from the board, and I just wanted to remind everybody of that. And then moving over to page 6 of 9, I'd like to just refresh everyone's memory on what the board determined relative to the item case 4C, Marmol Radziner, applicant on behalf of Grit Development, owner for certificate approval for the painting. The motion that was accepted, we approved the prep work, minor repairs, patching, and removal of extraneous surface conduit shown in the application packet presented today. We approved that the applicant prepare the painting, lighting, awnings, and sign program for board consideration at the May meeting, and send a recommendation to the City Council Subcommittee recommending that the council require the applicant to implement additional stabilization work as soon as possible. So I really just mentioned that and wanted to review what our actions were there, because of course we're going to see some further Town and Country Center activity here today. And then on page 7 of 9, the Tennis Club Historic District, the criteria for evaluating historic district applications. It was mentioned in there that we include in this discussion the historic ruins that are there in the Historic Tennis Club District. And I think we're going to see some activity on our agenda today on that. And one other quick thing. I'm sorry, page 9 of 9. It is just a correction. It's paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Member Burkett mentioned the board had received an invitation from Michelle Ritchie, and I believe that's Melissa Ritchie.
Thank you.
So it's just a simple correction there. So those are all of my comments on the minutes. I'll take a motion to accept
So
and
moved.
approve. Okay,
Just one correction.
please.
On the chart in the beginning, the grid, in the March 2018 meeting, I was excused or abstained. I mean, I was not here.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Dick, please.
On 5B, in reference to the Steve McQueen landscape revisions, it's so noted, I just wanted to bring a highlight again, that there was to be additional tours for the members, HSB members that did not get the tour, the property, that maybe this should be under board comments, but I just want to be sure that we don't slip and that this does get scheduled for those that didn't see it. And I think we talked about a review about the designation of that, which probably would come under board comments. But while we're on the Steve McQueen thing, I just wanted to highlight that.
All right, reference the page that you're,
5B on page 7.
of April the 10th? Page 7?
Second, third paragraph, last paragraph.
Yes, okay. Yes, thank you for bringing that up again. And we had questioned that, and the staff had said that it was fully permitted now and going along and all that. So any opportunity for an additional site visit for those members who missed it?
Yes, as we mentioned in one of the earlier meetings, we would coordinate with the owner to do those schedulings. We've had a pretty busy month with some other scheduling, so we'll try to get to that as soon as we can.
Okay. So I think we have our first and a second. Any other discussion on the minutes of the April meeting? All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? All right, thank you very much. All right, moving on to our agenda. We've just approved the consent calendar and the approval of the minutes. As I mentioned, we do not have a public hearing this morning, so we will move on to unfinished business. 3A, this is case number 3.1780, MAA, HSPB number 51. Marmel Radziner, applicant, on behalf of Grit Development, LLC, owner, for a certificate of approval for painting of the Town and Country Center located at 146, 174 North Palm Canyon Drive and 167 through 171 North Indian Canyon Drive, a Class 1 historic site. Staff report, please.
Mr. Chair and members of the board, as you recall, we discussed this item at your agenda last month. At that time, we approved the minor repairs, but we requested that the additional items, the finalization on the paint colors, awnings, et cetera, come back to you today. And so we're here primarily to look at the paint colors and the awnings. As I conclude my comments, I'll go through some of the additional steps that we'll still want to look at. Again, refreshing your memory on the addresses and the different buildings that compose part of the complex are shown here on this slide. Let me go through the paint colors. One of the issues in your backup materials is, of course, our color copier does not quite always represent accurately the colors. And so the applicants have brought the paint samples up here on the wall. Those are identified by the same numbers as we have on the elevations, so PT1, PT2, PT3, et cetera. Starting first with the building at 152 to 146, Palm Canyon. Again, this is the Bank of America building and the smaller tenant space immediately adjacent to it. These are the final paint colors that are proposed, as you can see there on the wall and on the image in front of you. And so those are the paint colors that are part of the final selection being presented to you today. Again, these are the three colors, PT1, PT2, and PT3, shown on the samples there to the right of the screen. Moving to the next buildings, 156 to 166, and then 170 to 174, utilizing the same paint scheme on the North Palm Canyon facade. One of the issues in terms of my color printout is it doesn't show PT4, paint color 4, which are the panels on the upper story of the building. They just appear white in your illustrations, but in actuality, those are, again, PT4, which you can see in the sample there. And so those will be the colors of the panels on the upper story of the building. Again, these are the three colors being used on the building, PT3, PT4, and PT8. One of the things I want to point out is the proposed awning structure. It's a little bit difficult to see in the elevation, and maybe, let me just, I'll go up to the screen here. So what they're proposing is essentially a box awning. So on the other elevation that we just looked at, it appears flat. You don't really get a sense of what the awning is. But as you see the side section here, you can see that the awning is about 3.5 feet deep, about 3.5 feet tall, and again, it's a box awning. That's to align directly with the architectural features of the building. Currently, they have sloped awnings in front of the building, and so this brings it more in line with the architectural form. Looking at the other building, there's a little bit of a difference because of the way that the site slopes in terms of this dimension here between the two buildings that frame the paseo that goes back to the courtyard. So you'll notice here that the awning is not as tall on the other one. Again, it's to match the depth of this piece here, the architectural feature. And so it will have the same extension from the face of the building, but the overall height of the awning is going to be less. And again, that's to match the architectural features. So those are the awnings that are proposed. And then the applicant has also given us a sample of the awning color. And again, that's to coordinate with the colors that are being proposed for the buildings themselves. On the interior of the courtyard building, they'll be utilizing paint colors PT7 and PT8. And again, just going back, the PT7 is going to be the base color on the face of the building, with the PT8 color being used on the overhangs, on the eyebrows there. And then going to the back building at 169 North Indian Canyon, this is different than what we had in our illustrations last month. As you'll recall from last month, it was a much more vibrant palette, if you will. And this is what they are proposing. And so they'll be utilizing PT5, PT6, and PT8 for the building. And then PT7, I believe, is going to be used on the low walls that you see there at the bottom of the illustration in front of the building on the Indian Canyon frontage. And then also, let's see, I thought there were some on the interior, but I may be wrong. I'll ask the applicant to just go through that in a little bit greater detail. This is looking at the interior of the 169 North Indian Canyon, here facing the courtyard. Again, you see the colors being used on the face of the building and the details. And so that is what is being proposed for that building. And then as a reminder, on the E.F. Hutton Building 168 North Palm Canyon, there is no painting being done on this building except for the removal of some paint that you see on the tiles on the face of the building. So restoring those back to the way that they should be is what is being proposed as part of this. So that gives you the overall picture of the paint. Again, I'd like to ask the applicant to go through a little bit more detail in terms of their investigative study and the scrapings that they did to come up with these paint colors. The awnings, again, what is being proposed are the box awnings on the building, and so we will ask you to look at those and to make a recommendation on those today as well. One of the areas that I mentioned in my staff report about which I would like some additional information is relative to the proposed sign program. They are showing where the signage is proposed on the building, so they have illustrated that. I would just like to hear from the applicant if that is going to be the final selection in terms of the size and locations and types of signs before I have you take action on that. What will ultimately be required for the sign program is they will need to submit a formal sign program that would be reviewed by the Architectural Advisory Committee. But because there is an issue of does the signage impact the historic structure, that we need the approval of the Historic Site Preservation Board before moving forward with the sign program. The other thing that I wanted to talk about to you was relative to the conditions of approval that I am proposing to you. One of the things that you had a concern about last month was the structural stability of the buildings in general, that you didn't want to just see painting, but wanted to have some issues relative to the structural stability addressed. As the condition was read earlier, as we discussed the minutes, the idea was to forward a recommendation to the City Council Subcommittee on that issue. In doing some further discussion with the applicant, they are in the process of doing a structural study. And so what I'm proposing as a condition of approval to follow up on what you had recommended last month is that by January of 2019, they submit the structural study to us. We'll review that with the City Council Subcommittee, and then at their direction, we'll bring that forward to the Historic Site Preservation Board. So I think that condition of approval addresses your concern from last month relative to any additional maintenance work that may need to be done on top of the painting. With that, that concludes my comments to you. I will point out that you did receive via email and also hard copies of some additional correspondence that was provided to you that did not go out in your packets, and that is again at your table before you today. That concludes my comments. I'd be happy to answer any questions. The applicant is here and will make a presentation to you. We also have Mayor Pro Tem Roberts here who can represent the City Council Subcommittee, and then we have members of PS ModCom here as well, Nikki McLaughlin, who worked very closely with Dunn Edwards in terms of the paint samples. So that concludes my comments. Thank you.
All right, wonderful. Any questions of staff? Please, Linda.
The letter we received from Mr. Kalin went into great detail about the colors. And as you went through the presentation, my question is, how close did they come to matching what he is showing us that our original paint color, the original paint palette of the building?
What I would like the applicant to do is to go through their investigative study on the paint colors and provide that information to you since they did that work.
So okay, I would like that, but are they close or are they not close, in your opinion?
In my opinion, they're close. And again, I'm basing that on the research that was done by the applicant's team.
Okay, and not the research that was done by Mr. Kalin?
In terms of the colors being selected themselves, yes, I
Correct.
would say they're close. Now, one of the things that Mr. Kalin points out is on the balcony of the courtyard face of the building at 169, that there's a difference in terms of what is being proposed. And again, I would like the applicant to address that. They've reviewed Mr. Kalin's correspondence, and that would be appropriate for them to address that question.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Flynn, I would just like to acknowledge that I think putting this condition of approval on here on the stabilization of the building, that just wrapped up everything and all of our concerns about dry rot and all those different things. So thank you for conditioning it as such.
Certainly.
All right, having no further questions of staff, we'll invite the applicant, please. Good morning, gentlemen, and please introduce yourself, Leo.
Good morning. Yes, my name is Leo Marmol with Marmol Radziner in Los Angeles. I'm here as well with Chris Shanley from our office, and we're here representing Grid Development for this application. I would like to begin by just reminding the board that we are here to discuss the minor streetscape improvements to the historic resource. The intent of this minor improvement is to simply tie us over as we work on a master plan development. Our firm has been commissioned to work on that master plan. We are in the process of doing that, and our intent is to come back before the board this year to present our master plan. With that, we will also be requesting and going forward with a negotiation with the city to go into a development agreement to fulfill that master plan. The other understanding on the streetscape improvement is that these minor improvements will deem us in compliance with the vacated building ordinance for a minimum of 24 months from the time the work is completed, and to also clarify that the owner does not intend to lease any of the spaces that are currently unoccupied within the various buildings. And finally, that when these streetscape improvements are completed, we do intend to leave the temporary chain link fence as well as the monitoring that's currently in place. Those will remain in place even following these improvements.
Good morning. I'm Chris Shanley with Marmol Radziner. Good to see you all again. I haven't been here for probably about 2 years. So I get the fun part, which is to talk about the paint colors. First off, I wanted to kind of explain the process by which the paint color sampling process took place. There were there were 3 site visits conducted by Dunn Edwards. Nikki McLaughlin was, I think, on 2 of those site visits with a woman by the name of Sarah McLean. She's the color marketing manager with Dunn Edwards. Dunn Edwards volunteered their time and worked on this pro bono to basically just kind of support the cause of the restoration of the Town and Country Center. Nikki had done a lot of the legwork with them and put us in touch with this individual at Dunn Edwards. And so on the last site visit that took place, I was actually present there. That was about 5 weeks ago. It was about a week prior to the last HSPB meeting. We removed about 20 samples from all the various buildings. I think what's important to understand is the Town and Country, obviously, if you look at the site plan, it's multiple buildings. There's multiple colors and multiple color schemes on each building. What we found most interesting about the color sampling process and comparing it to some of the historic photos, actual historic color photos, that is that there were some colors that appeared on different buildings as sort of a unifying concept, which is reasonable and kind of logical. And so we basically kind of methodically went building by building with an historic color image that we felt was probably the most accurate in terms of going back to maybe what the original paint color scheme was. I mean, again, the period of significance for the center is 7 years. It's 1948 to 1955, according to the language of the nomination. In 7 years, there's lots of different color schemes that can happen. So we tried, to the best of our ability, to match what we thought was probably, again, the most original color schemes for each of the buildings. So we actually, and what the process that they use is they extract samples of material samples about, at least the size of a quarter, and they do what's called a spectrophotometer reading. These are actually samples of the materials that were actually extracted. You actually have to remove material so that you can then take it back to the lab, and they put it under a spectrophotometer device. And that basically is an electronic device that is hooked up to a computer and reads the wavelength, color wavelength of the color. 90% of the time, basically what that produces is a prescription, and that prescription is pigment. And that's the success rate, of the spectrophotometer study is about 90% accurate. So as far as we're concerned, the colors that you see here are very accurate in terms of what was there. Where we took each sample, we basically, in terms of the methodology, you want to take samples that have been in areas that have been protected out of UV areas. So we try to find areas under cover, under the bottom of soffit conditions in enclosed areas where it had been repainted potentially, but there had been exposed to UV. Because obviously over time, UV with these very dark saturated colors start to fade. So if you scrape and you scrape and you find the base color, that's probably not what the color looked like originally back in whatever, 1948, 1950, 1952. So that was the most important thing, is where and how we extracted the samples so that we thought they were as accurate as to what was originally placed on those buildings. Any questions at this point on that? I think that's probably all I have to say as far as the painting colors.
Then I do have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I've always been curious.
Bill? There you go.
I've always been curious, how do you know when you've hit original material, in this case redwood, right, that may have not been painted, and then subsequently there was a primer color put on it, and then there was a color put on it?
Right.
How do you know when you're at the original color level?
I think when you kind of get to the point where you have a color and then you scrape beyond that and you find whether it's either a white or a gray base color, which is probably a primer coat. So you just have to keep going and going with that process until you achieve that. And again, in most cases where you find protected areas, more than likely, you're looking at corners where brushes didn't really get there. So the less layers you have, obviously, the better. But if you can see, and the best way to do this is an example of, let's say, the yellow fascia sample. That was the back. That was a piece of the plaster fascia that was removed from the B of A building, which the back color, which is the yellow color, and there was no other color, beneath that other than a primer coat. Go ahead.
Okay, that answers my question. Thank you.
And I think in summary, what the issue is that we do believe that the actual colors that are on the wall are accurate within 90% probability. What is in the conversation and exemplified by the letter received in addition to our package is that where these colors occurred is still a conversation. And we just have to remember that we're talking about a development that was put in place over decades, and even the period of significance is identified as a 7-year duration. During those 7 years, there were multiple color schemes. And so there are multiple photos showing different color schemes. And so we're just simply trying to choose the best photos of particular color schemes to determine where these colors should go. We accept that it's an open conversation, and if other members of the board or the foundation or the public wish us to consider placing these colors differently than what we've currently shown, we're certainly open to that. But we have confidence these are the right colors. Where they should go, we've taken a stab at that. We're open to other suggestions, and ultimately we're flexible on where these colors should go in the assembly of buildings that are out there.
Does that conclude your presentation?
Yes.
Questions of the applicant? Leo, I'd like to say thank you for coming back within 30 days, especially with the awning program. I think that was certainly tasked you beyond what you had hoped to do in such a short period of time. You know, so I'm sorry, Mr. Bernstein, a tenant in the building, asked if the removal of the old awning could coincide with the installation of the new awning, and will that be feasible?
Yes, certainly as the work plan develops, the goal will be to do all of this work in a very seamless construction flow.
Right.
It's not to say that one day they'll be removed and the next day they will be put up, but certainly in the same construction sequencing,
Right.
the goal will be to replace the signage as quickly as possible.
Right. Well, I certainly understand, especially this time of the year, with the west-facing sun being what it is, it would be difficult for any of the tenants there to go too long without the awning. And then, staff, we know that the sign program is going to come back to us later, and the sign program will be on the fascia of the awnings?
We are proposing two different locations. One is on the fascia of the awning, the street-facing face of the awning. The second are blade signs on one of the buildings. And the only condition on the blade sign is that we have to maintain a minimum clearance under that sign.
Of course.
For people to walk by.
For tall people,
Yes.
The only other comment I had, and again, Mr. Bernstein brought it up, if some additional lighting could be installed, I think it was in the courtyard area, because at night that is a very, very dark area. Could you include that in your work scope?
The reference that was made was specifically to the restoration plan. I do know that in the restoration plan, we will look at lighting for the entire site. With this minor improvement, we are not looking at upgrading the lighting. We are simply removing non-original lights.
Gotcha.
However, with that concern being brought up, we're certainly willing to look at the current condition of the lighting, and if we need to add some security lights or safety lights in the courtyard, I'm sure the owner would be more than willing to do that.
I think that's a reasonable. Anyone? Dick, please.
Yes. In reference to the windows that are semi-boarded up, some of them are showing broken. What, can you explain what the plan is for that as the interim?
Yes, as part of the minor repairs, if there's any broken panes, we intend to replace those panes so that there shouldn't be any boarded up glass panes.
So they'll all be, those boards, they'll come down, right?
That's correct. We intend to simply, again, in the definition of minor repair, that would include replacing broken glass.
Oh, great. Okay, that's good. And the cables, I think they are mentioned, but there's cables that are strewn throughout the buildings. I know it was a part of the original plan. I just wanted to verify that
Conduit.
there are
I'm sorry.
large cable conduits, I think,
Conduit.
that are
Oh.
draping around different parts of the building.
Yeah, we will do our best to clean up any abandoned cables or conduits. There are some conduits that are feeding temporary lights or lights and security cameras and such. We intend to leave those in place and simply paint them to match the adjacent wall surface.
Right.
But we will remove anything that's abandoned and
Well,
not in use.
and maybe it's not even removal, but it seems like some that are just like draping down on the building, if they could be put up on the roof,
Sure.
if there's room.
Yeah.
Is it pretty unsightly? I don't think this is any, I don't know if there's anything you can do about this or not, but it's kind of amusing to see the yellow brick road going from Mel's Place to a certain location. Is that going to stay to amuse us, or do you know, are there any plans for that?
We have not looked at the yellow brick road
Oh.
in detail. We're happy to do that and see if we can figure out a strategy for the yellow brick road.
Right. And the sidewalk condition, I'm not talking about resurfacing or anything, but it's pretty bad. I was there Sunday, and the odor coming out of even this area is really rancid. So I would hope that that would be done. And my next question is really for staff. Is Mel's sidewalk along the entry, is that in conformity as far as the space that they are actually taken?
I believe it is. There was an outdoor dining permit that was approved for them, but we can verify that they have
'cause
not
it's-
expanded beyond the boundaries listed in their
It's
permit.
like 2/3 of that walk space, and with the umbrellas, to the way they're extending out, I mean, you really got to know where you're going to get back into that space. And my last thing is, sitting at the new Tommy Bahamas restaurant on Sunday night and looking directly over to the center, I note that you do have plans to paint that sign that's on the side of the building by PS Destinations, which is great. But I don't know if there's any other plans to identify that what is back there as the town and country or not. But it's really a golden opportunity to highlight basically where the town and country, so many people just still do not understand the in town, the residents. So if there's any consideration can be given to that, I would ask that to be considered as well. Thank you very much. I appreciate the work that you've done and what's gone into the report. And also, I know that you worked with Nikki and that group, and I know the board greatly appreciates all that's gone into this, and that is kind of a touchy, unusual project. Like you said, it's 90% accurate in your estimation. So we thank you for the work that's been done so far.
Thank you.
Dick, for those of the audience or somebody watching at home that may not be familiar with the yellow brick road that you referenced, but not everybody is familiar with it, could you kind of elaborate on that?
It goes from the restaurant over to what I believe is a restroom that's being utilized by, I guess that's the only restroom that this eatery has. But it is just a painted walkway with yellow brick.
So it's almost wayfinding?
Yeah.
It's to
Yeah.
direct?
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. All right.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Dick. Any other questions of the applicant?
Yes,
Please,
I do.
Linda?
Mr. Marmol, you said you were going to be bringing back a structural study by January 2019. Once we see that and that moves forward, what is the timeline for getting things done according to the structural study?
We do not have a timeline at this point. Our only commitment at the moment is a commitment to bring back to the HSPB a master plan, and that would include the structural report on the condition of the buildings. We had originally requested and hoped that the timeline on the report would actually be March 31st of next year, but we do believe we can produce the report by January of 2019. And so right now there is not a timeline for the actual restoration of the buildings.
So we may be looking at this property as is for years to come.
Let me address that if I might. Based on the structural report, we'll identify if there are immediate needs that need to be taken care of. We have language in Chapter 8.05 of the Municipal Code relative to historic preservation stating that there's a minimum standard that we need to maintain Class 1 properties. So if there is an issue, the city would ask them to address those immediately.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good presentation, thank you. Board?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Lavoie.
I'm trying to think of how to say this. I move that we approve the certificate of approval for the proposed paint colors with the following conditions as noted in the staff report. I would also add to the motion that the analysis provided by the applicant clearly indicated that these were perhaps the original colors and not the subsequent colors of the building of its prime interpretive period.
Okay. Ken, did you get that? All right. Is that your motion?
That's my motion.
Second.
And the second is Mr. Hayes. Any further discussion? Linda?
I would ask that, in addition, that the motion include that the colors that we see in some of the photographs be matched as closely to the same positions of the buildings as we see in the photos. You know, there was some discussion that they weren't sure what colors went where. If we have photos that document a blue goes here and a yellow goes there, I would hope that the applicant would make certain that when they are painting, that they would come as close to the photos as possible to make this look as original as possible.
Actually, that's not the motion. The motion is.
Right. I know it's not.
And no, I don't accept that
Okay.
change. I was very careful in that. The applicants, by their analysis, have proven to me, I have your same concern, have proven to me that the colors they are proposing are where they were originally on the building. So the photographs, and by their presentation said that, yes, the building had been painted probably every 2 years, a different color scheme. And that color scheme changed. So you would have to assume then that the blue fascia board and the blue belly band on the building were probably a subsequent color. And the color analysis would have indicated that had gone through that color to the original color. And that's what I'm getting at. That's my motion, is the original color as the analysis provided.
Okay.
Ken, did you? Okay, so you've cleared that up. Any further discussion on the motion? We have a first and a second. Well, no, we have our second. I'm sorry, Dick. Yep, no, we have the second. No further discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Wonderful. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody. Very exciting. Very, very exciting. Okay, moving on to item 3B on the agenda. This is case number 3.3377. This is a certificate of approval request by the City of Palm Springs for further revisions to the City Council Chamber Dyess at the Palm Springs City Hall, a Class 1 historic site, HSPB number 33D. And of course, it is located at 3200 East Tahquitz Canyon Way. Ken, staff report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As noted in your staff report, and as you remember from a couple of years ago, the board did review the revisions to the millwork at the City Council Dyess based on an earlier design created by designer Jeff Jaraski, and that project was built. In the time that the city has been using the Council Dyess, we found that there are some shortcomings, some quality issues, some functional problems, and so they've begun to look at this again. And the current proposal that's before you is addressing several concerns and problems and shortcomings that are primarily summarized on page 7 of your staff report. And I'm going to see if I can get to this next thing quickly. It's okay. Let's see what gets us to the full screen. Thank you. And then we got up and down here. So these are also in your packets, but on page 7, the issues that are being addressed at this time are as follows. The front piece that was put on top of the basic cabinet or countertop obstructed the view between the members of the council and the audience. The angle of the control panel on the council millwork also reduced the amount of usable workspace behind that raised portion. The open space for staff seating between the 2 rows of workstations and the staff dais were found to be too narrow. The grain of the plywood on the front of the millwork was installed horizontally rather than vertically as the original millwork was constructed, which had left some fairly clumsy butt joints between the plywood pieces. The fit and finish in general was problematic and portions were coming apart. The additional control cabinet that was necessary at the city clerk's workstation impinged on the seating area for that station, and there was somewhat of an interim means of applying the nameplates with Velcro that has been proving problematic. To resolve these problems, the vendor is working with the city on the following revisions. The AV screens at each workstation are being partially recessed into the top of the work surface to reduce the overall height of the millwork. The space between the AV screens at each station is being opened up to create more workspace at each workstation behind that panel. The 2 rows of workstations at the staff dais are being pushed further apart to provide more space for the seating areas. The millwork is being rebuilt with the grain running vertically rather than horizontally with small chamfered edges at the edge where the joints abut to more elegantly finish the joints between the plywood pieces on the faces and the sides of the millwork. The additional control cabinet that's necessary at the city clerk's workstation is being relocated from behind the workstation to just in front of it so that it provides more workspace at the city clerk's position. And the Velcro nameplates are being replaced with a recessed slot that will allow the nameplates to be more sturdily installed. On page 8 of your staff report is the basic summary of the process that's been taken to date. And in addition, on the top of page 8, I want to point out that the colors that were originally, that were in the current construction as you see it today sitting in the room, was somewhat of a pecan color with a light gray on the top piece. And what is being proposed, which is, we believe, more consistent with the original millwork that was in the chamber when it was built in the 50s, is more of a natural clear finished birch plywood. And then lastly, as you know on the top of page 8, the base board, which is the toe kick area, if you will, was done originally, as I'll show you in these drawings if I can advance these quickly, and I'll go back to some of these in just a moment, was done in vinyl. So there you can kind of see it across the front of the council dais there. And so what's being proposed now is that rather than that wood toe kick that we have now, which is getting scuffed up badly, it would go back to be a vinyl base as was the original. The analysis of the certificate of approval against the guidelines of the Historic Preservation Ordinance are outlined on pages 8 and 9 of your staff report. And as we have noted, we believe that this proposal that's coming forward today actually improves the overall architectural integrity and the historic integrity of the council dais and the chamber. The pieces that we have on the board here, which Councilmember Roberts will explain further, indicate the clear finish birch plywood that's being proposed. There is a question that we're seeking your direction from in terms of how these individual pieces of plywood abut one another. So the basic scheme is to simply abut them with the plywood grain running vertically with a slight 45-degree chamfer or eased edge. The second approach would be to separate them slightly using a piece of plywood to create a vertical reveal that would basically set off each one of the workstations visually on the front panel of the Dyess millwork. Lastly, on in your staff report, on the front cover, you'll note some conditions of approval that we're recommending. I'll run through these very quickly. To square off the corner of the millwork, well, you can actually see it here. It was kind of whacked off in the original design, and there's an opportunity. If you see here how we don't have a pointer here, do we? Let me just step here real quick then so I can get this quickly explained to you. So when this thing was originally designed, as you can see, these were simply squared off. These stairways, the stairway between this level and this level simply then would die into it. So we're recommending that it go back to that way on this newly proposed corrections. Some housekeeping things is to provide a slot at the bottom of the V in the millwork desktop that helps us to maintain those work surfaces cleanly. There's a seal that is proposed to be mounted on, there you can see in the original drawings, there was a seal against the back wall. There you see it in that photo, and in the revised condition in the Dyess, oops, see if I can get to the correct location here. Beg your pardon. I'm sorry. Anyways, it would go immediately above the current sliding panels. If you recall being in the council chambers, there's a set of sliding panels. There's a front piece above that. That's where the city seal would go. Wood grain to be run vertically. The board on item number 7, we are requesting that you clarify the detail at the butt joints between the plywood panels. The base on all areas to be vinyl base as shown in the samples. Work surface heights to the top of all work surface to be 30 inches. And then corners and edges at a 1/4 inch diameter, eased or softened edges, not sharp edges. And that's simply to help avoid the edges being splintered and chipped. And then lastly, that shop drawings for fabrication of all millwork be submitted to the city for approval prior to fabrication. So that completes our staff report. We are recommending a certificate of approval for these modifications. We believe that they do increase the historic integrity of the space as well as improving immensely a lot of the functionality on it. And I'm going to turn the mic over to Councilmember Roberts, who will give you some additional detail on this. Thank you.
Good morning. First of all, Ken, thank you for an excellent report, and thank you for wearing such a lovely tie today. Board, first of all, thank you for seeing this. So we almost, in as much as we were unhappy with the results of the first rebuild of the Dyess, we're kind of grateful to get a second bite at this apple, because we recognized that in the original designs, they didn't take into account as much as we had hoped the historic aspects of the Dyess and the historic aspects of the room. So we got to spend more time with that. I also want to acknowledge that my co-subcommittee member, Mayor Moon, is here with me today. And with the changing of the council, I got a new subcommittee member, and I'm grateful that it's the mayor. So he's here for questions as well. So what we're really asking today is, we're doing obviously a full rebuild of the Dyess. And by and large, very similar to what's there today, except for a reduction in the height of the Dyess, because we couldn't see over it. And as Ken pointed out, there were just some other use issues coming with the staff Dyess, where it was too shallow, too low. There just were mistakes made in general, and definitely some aesthetic mistakes made. we pretty much stopped the completion of the Dyess. When we realized the company that had been hired to do this wasn't doing it to the specs that we had not only given, but to the quality that we had expected, we pretty much ended that contract abruptly. And we knew that we needed to go back to the drawing board, literally. At that point, we brought in a new draftsman who, instead of doing just some simple hand-done drawings, we had the entire room, or particularly the Dyess area, fully remodeled in CAD. And we thought this would be good not only for today, but in the future. And so we can pretty much see any angle, and the accuracy of these CAD drawings is about as accurate as you can get. Ken can walk through pretty much any angle. We can do flyovers or any other aspect that you want to see of this, and zoom in on any level that you want to see. What we're looking for today is we're looking for your approval on the minor changes that are being made, as well as a color change. We went back and forth on whether we should do this two-tone thing that had been done not only in the prior Dyess, prior to rebuild, but then the rebuilt Dyess. And we realized that maybe the best answer to that is not to go to two colors. When we looked back at the original drawings, we realized that the Dyess was always birch plywood. And why not maybe go back to that altogether? Ken came in and he was instrumental in helping with pulling up some of these original photographs that we had never seen before. So given that, what we're proposing, and I'll send this around and I'll show you this, just again, a very simple piece of birch plywood. We're proposing that all the furniture, the built-in furniture, be simply this birch plywood. And the one potential change that we can make that Ken described to you was perhaps adding a reveal to the front of it. So we wouldn't have these long expanses of unbroken wood, but perhaps do, and this isn't glued together, so I'll just kind of hold it up for you, and then I'll send it around. A very simple birch reveal within the fascia that would go, I think it's approximately every 4 feet, isn't it? So along the face of the Dyess that you're seeing there in the photographs, we would have this simple reveal, and I'll send this around, but you got to hold it together. And we also thought that perhaps this is a good opportunity also to add the city seal to the front of the room. And we looked at a number of locations, and I think the subcommittee finally landed on putting it above what I call the stage, or where the sliding panels are. And that way it could be seen by the cameras for when the different meetings are being held in the room. We thought it was also probably the best place to be seen from all over the room. You'll see, I don't know if you got these in the drawings, because I didn't see the final agenda packet that you got. There were some other locations proposed. One of them was when you're facing the Dyess down to the right, on the right side, right below where the mayor would normally sit. Did that even make it in, Ken? Okay, so really we're just proposing the one location for the city emblem, which would be above the stage or the sliding panel area. And then what I'm also going to send around is a carpet choice that staff had put together for us. We looked at a number of things, and the subcommittee landed on this, which would be recarpeting the entire area. And the reason you'll see two colors is it's a requirement to differentiate the steps from the rest of the carpeting so that people can see it, to reduce the trip hazard. So the darker piece would just be, I guess, on the risers and the steps of the two separate stepped areas, one right from the audience to the center of the Dyess space, and then further up into the staff area. And I'll send those around as well. And that concludes what I have to offer.
All right, excellent. Any questions of Councilman Roberts? I think this is brilliant. What a great idea. So we were not going to put like white tape across each step. I mean, I think this is very clever.
He wanted it, but we tried talking about it.
I really wanted orange reflective, but Ken talked me out of it. You know. Ken's a good influence for me.
So if I understand correctly, we're kind of mostly here today to sort of weigh in on whether it should be a slab front or whether it should have the reveal every so many feet.
And to get your take also, I'm sorry, to also get your take on going with a solid wood finish versus the two-tone, which is what we've been using for I don't know how many years in that room.
All right, I'm going to turn to our design professionals on the board.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Todd?
So I'm ecstatic that is changing. And I absolutely would opt for the single color rather than the two-tone. And I think in particular because it's more authentic to the original of the building. With respect to the reveal, I'm not quite sure. I had originally thought that the differentiation would be better because whenever you butt two pieces of wood, it's rarely done well and it looks not good. And the reveal will help to compensate for that, but you're also going to have this pattern going across the front, and I actually, if it's done well and there's a little bit of a softening of the edges, when I took that centerpiece out, I almost liked it more. So I don't know, I'm kind of on the fence as to what to do about the butting of the pieces of wood, but I'm absolutely in favor of one color in the birch and everything else.
Before you go on with your comments, I want to point out that, I guess this made it into their packet. So there's only really one photo of that, and it's drawing SS2, and I don't think there's a page number for it, but it's just shown in this down lower corner photo I'm holding up, and it shows the separation while you're considering that. Everything else shows it as sort of a slab front face.
SS1 or SS2?
SS2. And it's the lower right-hand corner photo shows the separation and the photo now. Actually, the entire page actually shows it, I see now.
And SS1 shows it as uninterrupted without the
Reveals.
reveal.
That's correct.
Yeah. All right, anyone else? Mr. Lavoie, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I share some of the same concerns. You never want to see the side of plywood, so when you open it up with a gap, you create a maintenance problem eventually. It's going to fray.
Just to clarify, Bill, I'm sure that what we're seeing are just some raw samples, that he would do an edge banding on the inside of the wood as well. So I think the concern that you're bringing up is this rough edge. He would end band that as well. So you would never see the ply. You would actually see another birch finish.
But in the gap.
Yes, and the same thing. The gap would be actually the face. So in other words, if he's doing this in panels, he would finish these sides before he joined them in to the reveal piece, which again would be a flat finished face. So all you would ever see is the actual face of the birch. You'd never see the plies that you're seeing in these samples right here, the actual wood plies. Does that make any sense at all?
Councilman, how much money do you have to spend?
Well, no, no. The good news.
Let me finish.
Well, no, the good news is that you don't have to worry about money. We've already got. Well, may I finish?
I want you. No, let me finish, please.
Oh, certainly.
Let me. I want you as a client. I think it would be more successful if the gap was like 1/8 of an inch. It would also be more successful instead of a wood slot. There are steel channels you do that finish tile and plywood, and use that as the reveal, rather than finishing both sides and gluing them together with a little piece of wood. That would be my suggestion. I support the same color wood everywhere, and the city seal needs to be raised up so it's not within 4 to 6 inches, so that it's more in the middle of the field of whatever space that is up there. Otherwise, I'm very happy.
Okay, thank you, Bill. Ken?
I just wanted to clarify, and the reason I'm kind of smiling is because as we went through this earlier, the whole notion of using a metal reveal was discussed. And we thought that the metal reveal would become too obtrusive visually. And so the notion of of edge butting and with a edge strip of solid wood or at that point where the reveal would be happen if you did the reveal seemed to be more cohesive with the original design rather than seeing a metal strip happening. So I was smiling when you said that because we went through that and everybody as they looked at it went, oh, I think better as just wood if we're going to do the reveal. Simply a matter of information.
And also to clarify, with respect to the reveal concept, if we go in that direction, the board doesn't have to be worried about costs. This has already been fully bid, so we're all pieces of wood. We wouldn't see any end pieces, or we wouldn't see any pieces of plywood showing on anything. So that's already within the bid. The good news is the rehabilitation of the rebuilding of the Dyess is within our original budget. We won't be spending any more to redo this than what was originally bid to do it the first time. So don't worry about costs, more worry about what you think is appropriate design-wise, okay?
Linda.
Question, and what was the reason for the reveal versus the solid?
Just an aesthetic option, that's all. The idea was, when the subcommittee was examining, and the subcommittee was myself, the mayor, and Ken Line was very involved in that as well, and other staff members. The idea was that the slab face of that is large and sort of, just sort of like unending piece of wood. And we thought it just might add a little dimension and a little character since we were no longer changing any, there was no longer going to be a color break in the wood. So we thought it might just add a little bit of dimension to the front of the Dyess, give it a little more character.
In my opinion, I like the less busy because for me, it focuses on the people rather than on the lines in the front and the lines in the back and the decor. I want people to come to council meetings and focus on you and not look at the beauty of the chamber. I want it to be clean and nice, but I want them there for the purpose that they're really there for.
Okay, Dick, before you talk, Todd, you're somewhat very well versed with Albert Frey's work, and you're kind of open to either the reveal or the solid panel. You don't have really a preference, or do you think when we look at the historic photographs and we see it all as one solid plane? Comments?
I would say without the reveal would be more historically accurate myself, given like other like if you look at Frey House 2, and which would probably be the best example of a use of plywood and built-in cabinetry. My understanding, my recollection is there's no reveal up there. It's just butted pieces of plywood. If anybody else recollects
Yeah, no, that's
what's
sort
up
of
there.
a recollection.
So if you're going to replicate something that he's done before, I would say myself without the reveal would probably be more historically accurate.
All right, thank you. Dick, again, I'm so sorry to have you, if you hold that thought. If it's one long piece of wood, will it be one long piece of wood, or will there have to be some seams?
No, there'll have to be some seams. And if I can use this to kind of help clarify that, if you take the little reveal out
Right.
and you butt the pieces together, this is what is,
Okay, gotcha.
this is what's called an eased edge. You just take the sharp edge off. It's a very small, almost a 1/16 of an inch chamfer that simply gives the two pieces of wood a clean point at which to abut one another. So that would be the condition if you were to do it without the reveal. I don't know if you want me to pass this around.
No,
so you
no,
sort of-
any questions?
How big would the pieces of wood be? Are they 6 foot each?
They're generally coming in 4-foot widths
4 foot
when you see a
widths?
vertically,
And the
cut.
reveals would be how many width, what width?
at the edges of that
Two-
plywood.
Is
So
it 2
every
feet?
4 feet.
Every 4
Every
feet.
4 feet. So the panels, the birch plywood panels come in 4 feet pieces.
So
you would
either
see
way,
those
they're
joint-
4 feet.
Yeah, either way, you're gonna get a line. So the question is, was it just a very tiny line like that? Or was it actually, or do we wanna go ahead and acknowledge that there's a break there by doing the reveal? So that was the only real question here.
Okay, All right, thank you. Dick, please.
I'm glad we did this because this just answered my
Is your phone,
my question.
Is your,
I was going the more historical route that Todd was on, but you're going to see a line no matter what. Obviously, the real is a more contemporary application, but if you're going to see a line, you're going to see a line. And so maybe I was really not in favor of the reveal for the historical reasons, but now that I've seen it this way, I could lean back to having with the reveal.
Is installing the reveal kind of more forgiving? The scene won't have to match up, the reveal is going to be a little bit more forgiving in the installation. Dan, did you want to add something?
Dick said exactly what I
Okay.
think.
All right. All right.
I mean, we have an expert cabinet maker who's been hired to build this, who's actually a furniture builder rather than a room builder, let's say, or a carpenter. So I suspect the details are going to be done well either way. But to answer your question specifically, Gary, yeah, I think it gives them a little bit more room for error.
Okay, so board, I think there are two issues that we kind of want to make a decision on, and I think several of us have already weighed in on the one color, the uniform color, as opposed to having the two colors. So I think we kind of have consensus on that. And where are we on either the one solid piece of wood with seams every 4 feet or the reveal every 4 feet?
Maybe you want to offer a vote and have them vote for one way or the
Well,
other.
I thought maybe we would get an idea as to where the board was going, but I'll certainly entertain a motion. Or may I make it myself? Sure. All right. Well, then I would move that we approve the new dais with the solid color of the birch as shown here today, and I would move that we add the reveal to the installation of the front of the dais.
I'll
That's-
second the motion with one question.
Okay.
Does the reveal, is it a certain size? Is it 1/4 of an inch, or can they make it less than that, or bigger, or whatever? I mean, I don't know what size a reveal is.
What's being proposed is actually this, which is about 1/4 of an inch. This piece was sent to us from the furniture maker. So that's probably most accurately what it's going to be. We can adjust it, but this is what they're proposing, which is what the subcommittee liked as well.
Okay. No, I'm fine with that. So.
So I second the motion.
Okay, so we have a first and a second, and any further discussion?
Mr. Chair, the
Bill.
location of the seal?
All right, yes, no, and so we would like to kind of identify more closely the location of the seal. So we have a motion on the floor with the first and a second. Do you want to amend the motion?
That there be a greater that there be a greater distance between the bottom of, or the top of the opening and the bottom of the seal?
Okay, so then the amendment would be to center the seal above the sliding panels between that and the ceiling of the chamber?
So center it horizontally and vertically.
Yeah?
Okay.
Okay. I'm the maker of the first, so I accept that.
I second, accept it.
Okay. And then I think we also want to approve this carpet, this contrasting carpet on the stairs and the risers and the treads, so that it clearly identifies the stair. So we can add that to the motion?
Second accepts.
Okay. Any further discussion? I think, did we include everything, Ken, in our, okay?
May I just ask, are you
Please?
picking up the rest of the conditions then that are in the opening of the
Yes,
separate?
accepting them as proposed. All right, so then, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, excellent, thank you so much. That's terrific.
Thank you.
Thank you. All righty, so that concludes our unfinished business. Now we will move on to agenda item number 4. This is new business, and this is item 4A. This is case number 3.4088 Clark Pellet, owner, requesting approval to demolish a Class 3 historic site located at 561 Camino Norte. Ken, staff report, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. As noted in your staff report, this is a request by the homeowner to demolish the home that's on the site at 561 Camino Norte. As noted in your staff report, the county database records the date of construction as 1944. However, from the material in the Citywide Historic Resources Survey that HRG provided, there is a construction date as early as 1937. The design of the original home is credited to the firm of Brewster and Benedict. However, no direct association was found in the material that was provided to staff that affirmatively made that tie. In your staff report, we do note that in the Citywide Historic Resources Survey, HRG identified this structure as potentially eligible for designation as a historic site, and the specific sheets that HRG prepared on this project are in the attachments to this particular staff report. Bear with me just a moment. So as noted, there was some information in a Desert Sun article, and there's some others that have been provided to you in an additional letter from a citizen regarding the architect for the project, which is believed to be a Hiram Hudson Benedict. And the applicant has included in the materials in your backup here information that they found on the internet from the San Diego Modernism site that referenced him. The point at which staff looked at this analysis and had some concern about it was as we got into the building permits. And I apologize, I'm not doing a very good job here of keeping my visuals going with...
We appreciate the visuals, no matter what the
Thank you.
challenge.
Flynn's a lot more proficient at this than I am, but thank you for bearing with me here. So this is an aerial of the project site. The point at which the red dot there is the home, and it includes the tan-colored tennis court at the south side of the site. This is a view from some earlier photos of the back of the site. This is of the front, again of the front, areas where these arches are. This was a photograph from 1959 that the applicant included in the submittal package of the back of the home. So when you look at this site here, this is what it looked like in 1959, which is in part why it seemed a little strange as we were looking at it that this house was truly a Spanish colonial revival, or if it may have been originally designed and built as a California ranch. And this was the building permit that caused us, I guess, the greatest degree of uncertainty. What you see there in this permit from 1966 is it says, construct arches at porch, add raised roof over garage and remodel front. When we looked at this and many of the other building permits that the applicant pulled forward from city records, we began to question whether or not all of these arches were something that may have been added sometime in the 60s. And in your staff report on page 2, I showed a comparative couple of images of what I would say is sort of a typical Spanish colonial revival building from the 30s and 40s and what we're seeing here. And the concern or the doubt that we had was that this seems to be very thin in its overall proportion of the columns relative to the width of the arches. That combined with what we were seeing in terms of things having been added through that 1966 permit led staff to be uncertain as to whether we were truly looking at a home from the 1930s and 40s in the Spanish colonial revival, or if we were looking at something that may have been a California ranch when it was first built that was later had the applied arches to give it its current appearance. So the applicant is requesting to demolish the building as a Class 3 site. It does have to come before you for approval of that demolition. The options that you have on this particular item are either one, to take no action and allow the applicant to proceed with the demolition of the structure. The second option that you have is you may impose a stay on the demolition request. That stay that you can impose can be a stay of demolition up to 120 days. And what you would do, and the purpose that you would do that would be to initiate further study to inform yourself as to whether there is in fact historic significance to this particular site. As we have identified in the staff report, with the uncertainties that we saw on the both the architectural detailing of the home and we did not see a direct documented linkage between Benedict and this home, even though there seemed to be lots of references that danced around it. So those were the reasons why we believe that we were not necessarily looking at what we think we're looking at in terms of it being a Spanish colonial revival home. So we are recommending that the board take no action and allow this site to be demolished. The applicant and homeowner are in the audience and would like to further explain the project to you, and I'm available to answer any other questions you may have. Thank you.
All right, so let's start with questions of staff.
What was
Questions
the third option? You said there were three
It's two.
options.
No, there's two.
Two
You may
options.
either take no action and
Okay,
allow this
or
demolition request to proceed, or you may impose a stay of demolition, in which case you would be then requesting staff to solicit proposals for a professional services contractor to investigate this home further.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions of staff?
Mr. Chair.
Please?
Staff, was an extant floor plan provided? Thank you.
No.
All right, would the applicant like to come forward and speak this morning? Please, welcome.
Good morning.
All right, please, before you, let's, because you'll need the mic on. Okay, wonderful. Gentlemen, please introduce yourself. I'm assuming you're Pellet and Cole.
I'm Cole. That's Pellet. Nice to meet you.
All right, welcome. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having us and considering our application. I think Ken did an excellent job of summarizing what our research uncovered. There's a lot of information here because we wanted to be thorough in understanding everything concerning the history of the house, and being of this age, you know, there are a number of historical facts that you can uncover. But to synthesize it, I think for what you would concern yourselves with most, we think is the question of the integrity of the house as it presently stands relative to its original architecture. And even if we stipulate that H.H. Benedict is the original architect, which I think, you know, is not an unreasonable conclusion, even though we couldn't like prove it categorically. The fact, all of the information we were able to uncover from the building permits, and then a very close investigation physically of the house itself, really demonstrates the degree to which owners subsequently made modifications to the house that really turned it into another house. So even if originally in the 30s or 40s there was a Benedict house there, the Benedict house just has been completely consumed by these later revisions that were made by permit applications with no known architects attached to them. So to us, I think the integrity question is really the most persuasive kind of aspect of the conclusion that we drew. We're happy to take any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Questions of the applicant? Dick?
Yes. First of all, I'd just like to make a correction, sort of the messenger, if you will, in reference to Renee Brown, which is on the opening page, the very bottom. I happened to meet with Renee yesterday, and she was shocked that she in no way would make such a statement, she doesn't feel that she's qualified even to make such a, which is very interesting, because she certainly has a very deep background. But I just think this needs, that part, I think there just must have been some misunderstanding, and I can see how that can happen, because in doing research, it's very easy for that to occur. But from the board's purpose, I wanted to set the record straight. And my second question is, has there been any, in the research, any thought given to peeling back the additions that happen back to the original structure, and then being able to do an addition to that structure, sort of like been done here before. We had one not that long ago with the Tudor home in Las Palmas. So I just think our board is, I think we've become very, very diligent and careful in watching what happens with these properties that have had a lot of cosmetic things added to them, and we certainly have plenty of examples in town where that's happened, for certain. But often these things, there's many things that can be reversible. So that, has there been any, was there any discussion about that in that process?
I'll take your second question first.
Okay.
We did not investigate the feasibility of peeling away the additions to reveal the original. And we didn't investigate that because it wasn't what we were interested in. So I really can't offer an opinion on whether that could be done, but it wouldn't be done by us. We wouldn't be interested in that, to be honest. To the first point, I'm going to go as quickly as possible to Renee Brown and apologize to her if I owe her an apology, because I had 3 lovely conversations with her. She's amazingly helpful and generous with her time, as we are not professional historians and did need assistance in understanding what, a good presentation and a thorough one would be. And I asked her twice if I could quote her on what she had said, and she said yes, but I can certainly understand that she and I could have miscommunicated on that, and if it's helpful to simply retract her statement and ask you not to consider it, I don't think it's the most important piece of information in the data that we provided. Please, I'll apologize to her, I'll apologize to you if it was inappropriate. It was certainly not intended to mislead in any way.
And please be aware that we only learned of this issue this morning when we walked into the hearing room. So had we learned of it earlier, we would have certainly amended the application.
Understood. Any other questions of the applicant? All right, I've got some comments. I think this is an amazing amount of work that you've done here to bring forward to us today. What I would ask, okay. So I'd like to say that over the last several years that I've been on this board has taken no action and has allowed the demolition of a number of properties that have come to this table without this amount of documentation. 2 properties that I come to mind are at Smoke Tree Ranch, that an applicant came forward and presented some over-the-table discussion, and those properties were allowed to be demolished. In my recent memory, there is also a property in Old Las Palmas. It was on a corner property, and we allowed that to go forward with its demolition. What I want to opine on here is that if these gentlemen had gone to the planning department or to the building department and pulled a remodel permit they wouldn't be sitting here at the table today. They could have taken a remodel permit, and they could have certainly raised a huge portion of the property and allowed to stand just that portion of the property that allowed under the remodel ordinance. So for them to go through the process, to be forthright, extremely honest, to do the amount of work that they have done here, to further what their own personal vision of the property is, I certainly don't want to impede or penalize them for following the letter of the law, doing what was right, to come to this board and ask us to allow this demolition where they do have other avenues available to them that would have achieved 90% of their goal and not have brought them to this board this morning. So I will be taking the recommended, I would be in favor of taking the recommended action on 3B to approve the proposed, I'm sorry, take no action and allow the demolition to proceed.
Mr. Chair.
Please.
While I agree that the resource has lost its integrity, this is a seriously flawed document that I'm unwilling to accept. First, the attribution to the architect. The comments that while the architect proceeded to do modern architecture, having worked in the firm of James Osborne Craig and George Washington Smith, to even be hired by either of those two people, you would have had to have been an expert in Spanish colonial architecture. And I would cite the career of Luda Maria Riggs, who worked for George Washington Smith, produced some of Santa Barbara's most exquisite Hispanic buildings, went on to produce some very astounding modern homes at the end of her career. They surpass what Bill Cody did. And for our own history, Bill Cody started by doing ranch homes in a Spanish flavor, and then moved on to his modernist expression. So to dismiss their potential of the architect is not correct. Also, the second from the last page, stating that the ranch style did not exemplify a particular period of time. No, that's not correct. It did. That was the preferred style in Palm Springs until the war. And the fact that we were not provided with a floor plan that would have indicated the original envelope of the building and subsequent additions very clearly. Instead, we were provided with what they wanted to do. While sometimes we asked for that, in the documentation of what was there, that's not the floor plan to include in what was there and having us understand the building. So this is one of the most flawed documents I've ever read. I'm not willing to accept the demolition based on this document. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ken.
Just a point of clarification. I answered Member Lavoie's question earlier if there had been a floor plan submitted. There was not a floor plan submitted, but what I did want to point out in the material provided by the applicant is that there was an aerial photograph. I'm looking through material now to see if I can find it. Huh? Oh, so you're aware of that. So there was a aerial photo that demarcated the portion of the home that was original and then those portions which have been added.
Yes.
There you go.
I
Yes.
saw that.
Yeah, okay. I just want to clarify that.
A floor plan would have been much
Right.
more informative.
Right. Thank you.
Linda,
Mr. Chair,
please.
I'm kind of surprised at your words.
Mm-hmm.
I think that all along, for years, the years I have served on this board, what we have been striving is for homeowners to do the right thing and not take out a demolition permit and knock down all the walls and leave up a fireplace and take a valuable piece of our history away from us. And from what I see here, this house does have integrity. I mean, I've been past it, I've looked through the gates to see what I could see. It's a beautiful home that has a lot of historic value, and I think that, once again, we are not giving this architect the credit he deserves. I mean, we don't know enough about him. It reminds me of Lapham again. And to take action on what we have here and allow them to do it because they've presented us this big book is not something that I can support.
I'd also like to chime in. I was particularly impressed with the Martin San Diego bio on the architect, who actually was a draftsperson, but he was very, very proficient. He had very well-known clients, and his job list is very interesting in California and in Arizona. And this house may date to the early 30s rather than the 40s. I think we need more documentation in terms of what the actual date of construction is. And obviously it was remodeled, quote unquote, over time. Some of those things can be reversed if you have a good applicant to bring the house back to its original condition. I realize the arches and the arcade have been remodeled, but those too can be brought back to existing conditions. And the later additions could also be taken off if need be. It's a very unusual kind of wing U-shaped planned house with the pool in the back, and it looks like it has the potential for rehabilitation.
Dick?
Yeah, I would like to see, and I understand the homeowners are not interested in doing this, but I would like to see that there be an attempt to peel back the onion and to go back to what the original was, at least. And then it doesn't mean that the homeowners cannot expand. Obviously, there's an interest in expanding from 5,500 some square feet to 96 or something like that. It's almost double. So it doesn't mean that the expansion can't take place. I understand this is a valuable piece of property in its location. But I just think that here is an opportunity again where you take what is the original and you work with that, and then the addition can be beautifully accomplished. We've already seen it being done. And I think this has to be the direction in which our board goes with these properties. We just can't continue to lose the valuable properties. So that's my feelings about it.
Dan?
I think the new house would be absolutely beautiful. Larry Booth's work is extraordinary. There's one other house in Palm Springs that he's done. I've been in it, and I think as far as an addition to our city, this house would be extraordinary.
So I think it's pretty clear what the direction of the board is going to be on this. But I have no horse in this race other than to have chaired this board for the past 4+ years, and to have struggled over the rampant remodeling of projects in Palm Springs that have allowed the loss of several properties. We'll discuss one today. So to me, by not allowing this property to be demolished, we are sending a very clear message to the general public. Don't pull a demolition permit, pull a remodel permit instead. So I just feel so strongly about that. I do not want to lose one more single house in Palm Springs that we don't have to. But I don't think that we should go above and beyond to, and I'm not using the word improperly here, penalize an applicant who owns a property, who has gone through either flawed research or astute research, to now be told, no, you can't. And I just posit to myself, can they leave here today and go across the hall and pull a remodel permit and then tear this house down next week down to a wall? So what did we really accomplish here? The problem is not the applicant or the project before us today. The problem is the what Dick has been carrying the water on for a very, very long time, what our current code for remodel permits allows, and not what the demolition permit allows. So that's all I'm going to say on this, folks. And Dan, I'm not familiar with the architect that the gentlemen have proposed build their replacement house. I'm not looking at what the replacement property is. I'm really looking at the process that we are forced here today to evaluate and take the appropriate action on. And that is to either allow the demolition or put a stay of demolition on it, have the city go through the historic resource survey on the property. I just don't see this house and this process warranting that. So those are the ends of my comments. Dick?
One last statement. I think what you brought up is so important, and it's another example of getting around the being able to circumvent the whole process, which I am hoping we're going to be addressing, and I think we will. There are plans to do that. It is continually in our face. We've had 3 situations, I believe, in the last 6 months. I have photographs that I have with me right now on my phone that just make your heart ache to see what's left. Maybe a 6-foot section of a wall. But it does highlight the importance of being able to get into this recommendation. So from that standpoint, it's good that this came up. And let's hope that this will be an impetus for us to go forward and be able to move the process along.
Mr. Chair?
Please, Linda.
Staff, this came to us because of the age of the home, correct?
That's correct.
Sure.
And so if we continue to educate our community that they have, if a home is a certain age, it has to go through the process. Do we have fines in place for homeowners who don't follow the process, who just go and tear down?
A homeowner or a property owner may not legally proceed with construction or demolition work on a property without the appropriate permits. So the short answer is no, you can't do that. People have done it illegally, in which case they usually get a stop work order if the city discovers it and fines.
Okay, and are those fines significant?
Typically, the fines that I'm aware of, if the project is discovered to have been done without permits, it's double the cost of the permit. So if a permit for a particular home might cost $22,000, the fine would be imposed that would double the cost of the permit, making it about $44,000.
Are we working on a plan that's going to come back to the Historic Preservation Board and then go to council that includes demolition and includes fines? And if so, when are we going to see it?
The HSPB historically does not impose fines or make
No,
recommendations on fines. It's the city council that does that. But you will have an ordinance that talks about remodeling and demolition.
I
Yeah.
understand it's the city council that does it, but I also understand that in our role, that we can make recommendations. Whether the city council even looks at it, that's up to them. But I think that if we have a strong enough argument and we have good reasoning behind it, that our city council will take note and consider. They may do nothing about it, but they would take note that we're interested, and that's why we're moving forward. For me, I hope this sends the message to people that they need to come in front of us, and I hope it sends a message to the planning department, to those who are giving out permits, that they need to really look at what they're issuing a permit for, that they just can't issue a permit without doing some research on the property, if it comes in and it's in the guidelines where it has to go to see us.
Well, the ordinance is rather clear on that which does come before the board if there's a demolition involved. In fact, the definition of demolition is actually included in the Historic Preservation Ordinance. So that is the guidance and the rules and the regulations that we do follow.
But the word remodel does not.
It's not in your ordinance.
Not in the ordinance.
No.
So Linda, I appreciate that you're coming back around to the same question here. And certainly if somebody pulls no permit and they do a demolition of a property or they add a second floor to their home, well then certainly the city has stop measures in place and fines in place for the no permit at all. But under our current guidelines, a remodel permit, which is what has allowed these several properties that we are aware of to be demolished down to, and it truly is a demolition. They're allowing the chimney, they're allowing the wall. And so again, I just can't stress enough, and I want to stop talking, I really do. But I really feel like at the conclusion of this meeting, depending on how it goes, these gentlemen could go back to the building department and pull the remodel permit and remodel their property and arrive at the same outcome. Ken?
Mr. Chair, I would like to just clarify
Please.
on your point. If the board places a stay,
Of course.
then
Of course.
everything is halted. They can't do anything with this property. You saw that happen with the home on Sunset Way several months ago, in which the board placed a stay, thinking the neighborhood was going to submit a historic district nomination. It never happened. The applicant eventually withdrew their request to demolish and were allowed to then proceed. But your stay really freezes any capital improvement or
Yes,
changes on a property.
and thank you for that clarification. And so then I would just go back to whatever the date was that this project was submitted to the city, that these gentlemen came forward and pulled a demolition permit. On that date in time, had, instead of a demolition permit, had they pulled a remodel permit, we would not be sitting at this table today with this discussion.
Correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
I think Todd.
I will shortly rectify that. So I certainly appreciate all the chair's comments, and I personally feel we are faced with two separate issues. We're faced with this immediate decision before us, and I think we're faced with the more bigger picture, long-term, urgent issue of how do we deal with, or when are we going to be able to deal with the remodel / partial demo issue. It's now been 5 months since the John Porter Clark House was significantly demolished, and we are, in my opinion, no further to having any kind of solution as to what all of us are talking about with respect to people can literally significantly demolish a house, and those actions do not come before us. And here we are 5 months after the demolition of the John Porter Clark House, and we have no action yet. So that to me is frustrating. Let me finish. I understand the urgency, and I feel that urgency, and I really want something to happen because we are still losing houses. That message aside, I agree that this application has way too many questions in it for me to allow the demolition to go forward. I am absolutely more inclined to want to stay this so we can investigate this property more and understand this property more. And with respect to the examples that came up, the one on Sunset that we also issued a stay on, that property has now been mostly significantly restored back to where it was. And so where we would have lost that property had we allowed that demolition to go through, we now have a restored significant example of a more appropriate style of architecture in that neighborhood. So I think this process does work. This process can work. But with respect to the revisions to the code and the ordinance, there's a lot of work that needs to be done.
Bill. Thank you, Mr. Chair. You're welcome. My problem is a report that seems biased in favor of dismissing the property. Had the report very clearly stated it is probably designed by, who worked in the offices of, and this, in its original form, represented that very high-end architectural style, which was a style common in the period of 1930s in Palm Springs and other places in California, and provided us a floor plan of that original layout, and then showed the additions and showed the photographs, and I would be able to say, yes, this original, perhaps preservable piece of architecture has been so compromised that it has lost its integrity and therefore could be demolished. This report does not provide me that basis of argument. That's my problem. And the new design has nothing to do with that decision.
I feel the same way about that, yes. Okay, anybody else? Gentlemen?
If we may. Sorry. If we may, we'd like to withdraw our application.
Staff?
They have the ability to withdraw.
Okay, if that's the official, you've withdrawn the application, do we do anything?
With the applicant stating on the record that they are withdrawing the application, then no action is required by the board.
Okay, all right. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Okay. Board will go on to, that completes our new business. That was item 4A. And we are on to our discussions 5A. Dick, a wrap-up, please, on the 2018 National Preservation Month Symposium.
Thank you.
Well, before I turn it over to him, there certainly was a subcommittee. Dan and Vincent, you were on the subcommittee for the HSPB event, but I think we'll all agree that Dick is the machinery, he's the oil, he's the cog in the wheels, and I will, for one, just give him a little round of applause. The entire subcommittee, or a crown. Dick, thank you, please.
Well, I have to extend my thank yous to so many people. You realize, I counted up this morning, there were 59 people involved with putting on this event. 59. And of that 59, of course, the staff was remarkable, and both Ken and Flynn, but also David Newell. He really deserves a huge thank you. That's for certain, and also the board. But everybody pitched in and helped, and that's what's so great. I'm happy to report that we did have we had 404 registrants for the main event. There were actually 350 plus 54 that were presenters, their guests, organizations, volunteers, tour homeowners, which brought us up to that point. That's for the main event. But what I'm really happy about is the introduction this year of our more in-depth education workshops. This year was focused on realtors, which we've been talking about as a board for quite some time. And that turned out to be, I thought, very nicely attended as well. And in speaking with several of the realtors at the break, they were quite pleased with what they were learning and hearing, and they were learning all sorts of new facts. I would like to ask going forward, I'd like to propose that the event format in the future continues that educational component on the following day. I think it was so powerful, and that subject matter, of course, was very, very specific. I think there's a lot of other subject matters that we could have that would be even a much broader audience that we could attract. But I think it's, our focus is about education. The main event certainly is an education itself. We try to bring in a little bit of lightness into that because we're building our audience. And speaking of that, of course, I lived with those registrants for the last month along with David on a daily basis almost. I was happily surprised. I'll bet you I didn't know 10% of the people that had registered for the event, which is exactly what we want. Besides our core group, it's excuse me, it's getting out to the residents to create the awareness. So I so appreciate staff allowing us to do this. I think it's a very, very important event. And by the way, with staff approval, we can have the convention center April the 14th in 2019, and I do have a file started. So that's the conclusion of my report. Thank you so much, all of you.
Dick, you did a great job, and I would like to also add that the event on Monday at City Hall for the Realtors was really outstanding. And Ken, your presentation on Class 1 and Mills Act and all of that was, that I believe should be part of our programming in 2019. It was short, it was succinct, it was terrific, and it is available for anybody to access. Remind the board, please, how we can do that.
Well, we have talked about putting it up on the website. We haven't had a chance to do that yet, but that was what we thought we would do. I wanted to also mention that following that Monday workshop, which was done in collaboration with the California Preservation Foundation, the Realtors Board contacted us and asked if we would present that same presentation, the portion that I did, to the whole Palm Springs Regional Realtors Board, which I did on, I believe the date was April 25th. But we had about 60 or 70 realtors that had their morning monthly meeting at the Mizell Center, and they invited us over to do that same presentation, and it was really well attended, and they came back with a lot of questions. So it is information that people are hungry for, and so we have a show that we can take on the road.
Good, excellent, excellent, very well done. Linda?
Ken, is that something that we could do at the library? Remember how we did that presentation at the library for some speaker series? Would that be one that we could do for the community at the library?
Jeannie Kays, who's the director of the library, oversees that little workshop series that they do, but I suppose we could talk with her if it was something that she would be interested in bringing in as part of her presentation. Thank you.
Dick, is that it?
That's it.
Any questions for Dick? All right, we'll move on to, thank you again, Dick, and Vincent and Dan for your participation on that subcommittee. Discussion 5B, Cornelia White Residence Reconstruction Update. Staff.
Mr. Chair, this is just very brief. Right now, the Department of Public Works under Assistant City Manager Marcus Fuller are working to finalize the budget numbers from the contractor who will be the prime on this project, and as soon as those numbers are received, he'll be preparing a presentation to the City Council to request funding.
Okay, so it's still a ways off, a meeting or two off?
I think it's a meeting or two off. I don't know. I had spoken with Marcus about a week or two ago, and he had told me he was waiting for the final numbers to come in. So I believe that we're ready for that number to be plugged in. I think his staff report is probably pretty much prepped and ready.
All right. Well, Marcus was coming in and out quite a bit this morning, so I think maybe he was probably waiting for this item to come up, and maybe he was going to add something to it. But I'll certainly accept what you've told us today as the update on that. Any questions? All right, excellent. 5C, the La Plaza Theater, Facility Assessment and Conceptual Redevelopment Plan Update, Subcommittee Lavoie, Burkett, and Marsh.
And I listed this as the subcommittee's item. I will just give a very brief intro that, as you probably know, the City Council has authorized funding for a comprehensive facilities assessment, and which would lead into a master plan, conceptual master plan for the facility for its future adaptive reuse. And roughly a week or two ago, I met with individuals from Gensler and Associates and Robert Chattel, who are their associate consultant overseeing the historic preservation aspect of it. They had electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, plumbing engineers, structural engineers, architects, historical consultants crawling all over the building. And it was about a 3-hour time frame that I was there, after which I finally left because there were no more questions coming of me, but they were still at the building. So I know that their work is obviously beginning. And I believe that as preliminary reports and so on are coming out from the consultant, that this City Council subcommittee will reach out to the HSPB subcommittee to bring in additional input. That was a part that I knew of from staff level, and any of you who are on the subcommittee may have further to report.
Dick?
Do you think that will happen, that the next meeting of the subcommittee with the when the present consulting company is in there working? When you have any idea when we might be convening?
I don't, Member Burkett, but I will try to find out their approximate time frame. I just don't. I'm not privy to it at the moment, so I'll find that out and bring that back to you at the next meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions of staff on that? Please.
I'd like to be in the audience when they're doing that presentation, just to hear what they found and what their recommendations are.
Okay. I would just add, and Mr. Mayor, you're still in the audience, Mayor Moon posted quite a number of photos on Facebook of that day at La Plaza with the many people involved in the assessment of the property. So I felt almost a part of it. It was well documented. So thank you for that. Okay. Moving on, 5D. This is the review of our certified local government annual report for period 10/1/16 through 9/30/17. Ken.
And this is simply a matter of information to file. There's no action that we require from you. I always go around and pester all of you early in the calendar year for the updates on your participation in any workshops and educational programming that you participate in. So always, please, if you do have workshops, seminars, programs, conferences of any nature related to historic preservation that aids you in your ability to do your work on this board, please let me know about those so that I can include them in this annual report.
And Ken, all I would add is this is on page 4 where my old email address still exists.
Okay.
So if we could correct that there in that area.
Thank you.
And then my comment is on page 6 where the commission and staff names are listed and the training, title, and description, including method, presentation, example, webinar, workshop. I think without exception, everyone benefits from the lecture series and the film series and all of that from Modernism Week. So how that adds to our educational, our board member educational requirement. So that's a good thing. Any other questions on that? Certified local government? No?
Should I add my stuff up in Santa Barbara?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Should I add my attendance in Santa Barbara to that?
Why not? You know, that's, you're learning and you're adding to your expertise that you contribute to this board through your participation there as well. So, yeah, I would
Well,
add that.
Todd included everything, including his 10th birthday party. as,
I think they talked about historic preservation there.
So, Bill, I think, yes, I think there's no fault in adding anything that informs and educates us, right?
That helps you in the performance and the work that you do here as a board member.
Excellent,
yeah.
excellent. Well put.
Thank you. And I would also just add as a footnote on this, part of what the CLG participation allows us is to participate in their CLG grant program.
Yes.
And I wanted to report to the board that this is the first year that the city of Palm Springs has submitted a request for a CLG grant. And it was done through a new member on the
Harriet?
staff named Harriet Barron. And the topic of the grant, just in a very brief summary, was to provide a preliminary facilities conditions report on the city-owned Class 1 historic structures that will aid in the city putting together its 5-year capital improvement program.
Excellent.
So that's what we've applied for the grant for. I don't know the amount of the grant. Maybe, do you? I don't.
Approximately what we're looking for is about $30,000.
These grants are fairly limited in the amounts that we're eligible to receive, and they usually are requiring that the city participate in a matching way of some kind, either via staff salaries and other types of monetary contributions. So this is a really big thing for Palm Springs to finally have some staff resources to apply for these kinds of grants. So we don't know right now whether we're going to be successful or not, but we're putting that energy out there. And I did have a conversation with Cynthia Woodward from the State Office of Historic Preservation, who acknowledged receipt of our grant, and they said they would be reviewing them shortly.
And I heard October is when we will find out, is that?
That's about.
Okay, so it's going to be a little bit.
It's a while.
Yeah.
All right, thank you very much. Any questions of staff on that? All right, our next item is 5E. This is the Wellwood Murray Library Courtyard Landscape Update, Subcommittee Johns Burkett and Dixon. We have not met, to my knowledge.
I think that what's occurring right now, I've had some dialogue on email with the Director of Engineering Services, Tom Garcia. Tom is taking over some of the projects that Franco had, who was on his staff, had been overseeing, and this was among those. As you know, there was a report on the historic analysis of the courtyard by landscape architectural historian Stephen Kalon. That report was provided to this board, it was provided to the library board, it was provided to the staff in the engineering department, and I believe that the next steps that are occurring on this is that the engineering department will be pulling together a meeting of the subcommittee, the HSPB subcommittee on the library, as well as the libraries subcommittee, to go over the content and the recommendations of the Kalon report in terms of the design of that courtyard. Those committee together will then determine whether there will be any further revisions made to the proposed design for its renovation, and then that information will be brought back to the board at a future time in the form of a certificate of approval. As you may remember, this is the last phase of the Wellwood Murray Memorial Library restoration.
Okay, thank you. Any questions of staff on 5E discussion? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to board member comments. Anything, board? Dick? Dan?
I would like
I would like to pass around the current status of 220 West Morito Place.
220 West Morito Place, okay?
Right. Okay, West Hermosa, sorry. 220 West Hermosa.
Okay,
Okay.
with you, yeah.
April 18th, Ken forwarded to us what was applied for as the demolition plan. So I'll pass that around. And then I will pass around 2 pictures that I took on Sunday.
Yeah, and this is the same property, just so
Same
I'm
property.
trying to remember, okay.
You were over there too?
Yes.
Yes.
Now, but did you use the term demolition permit?
There's a demolition plan you will see there. And the areas that I've marked in red were to have remained existing. And this was the condition Sunday morning.
Yeah. Yeah, well aware of this one. This one was setting the airwaves on fire a few weeks ago. Yes. Yes. So you're just sharing that with us?
I'm just sharing it with you. The one comforting thing to me is that I've met Marshall and Judith Gelfand, and I do believe that they will build something wonderful there.
Okay. Anybody else under board member comments? Todd, please.
So, given that, given what transpired here this afternoon, I'm assuming you're going to get, at some point soon, another permit request similar to that on the house that we weren't able to stay on Del Norte. Where are we with the revision to the building code?
I will address that under staff comments.
Okay, thank you.
All right, good. Yeah, no, I kind of knew that that was coming. Any other questions or comments? I'm sorry, comments, please. Dick?
The status of Orchid Tree, can you tell us what, and I would like to say that I got some very quick reaction from the code enforcement. Found that there were 2 doors broken in, or torn down at the site. And I reported it to code enforcement. And by the second day, they were boarded back up again. So it was really, I thought that was very, you hear all the bad stuff, I want you to hear some good stuff.
Thank you.
As
It's
well.
nice to hear occasionally. You don't hear it enough.
But if we could find out what's going on, and the status has been quite a while, as to what their progress is.
As those of you who watch city council agendas, you may have seen that they had an item on a city council agenda recently relative to their TOT rebate. If I remember correctly, the city council took no action on that request, did not feel comfortable in forwarding that request or approving that request. And so the status is that they do have entitlements approved through November of 2018. They would need to submit an extension of time application should they wish to continue with those entitlements. The city has not received any building permit applications or other applications for the project. So currently, there's no movement.
But they have till November.
They have until
Okay,
November.
that's good. Okay. All right. Thank you. So if I'm understanding correctly, then the Cornelia White House will be videoed, and is that accepted? Or
Well,
how does that stand?
Mr. Price commented on it today. A proposal was submitted for a documentary with a dollar amount assigned to it.
A proposal was submitted. It was forwarded on to Assistant City Manager Marcus Fuller. I believe that he was going to take that amount and incorporate it into the budget request that was going to be forwarded to the City Council. I know that there's also been discussions a while ago about any of the not-for-profits participating in the cost of that, but there have been no formal proposals put forth to the city at this time in that regard.
Okay, but Mr. Price did mention today that the Palm Springs Preservation Foundation has committed $7,500 towards that project.
And I think that makes it more feasible in terms of the project to have that type of participation in it.
Good,
Oh,
good.
that's good. Okay. And then we had a visit to Racket Club. Will that be on our agenda next week to have a discussion about the findings?
There won't be anything for you to take action on yet. We need to wait until they put forth a proposal, and then we'll bring it forward to you all.
So, okay, so we're going to wait for them to do a proposal? And then,
Yes.
And then it comes back to
Yeah.
us, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the process.
And the last thing is, this was just asking me the other day, and I asked Gary, and I don't think that we've had any precedent on this yet, but as to the board's position on solar panels on historic properties, I don't think we've had that come to us yet, have we? And
I didn't recall an instance. Anyone?
Well, I can talk about that. They can be, according to current state law, they cannot be prohibited. You can restrict them in some ways, but you can't add to the cost of them by a certain dollar amount, which is pretty threshold. Basically, they can't be prohibited.
Right.
Even in historic districts on class, or what would be class 1 structures.
can there be any regulations as to the height?
You can, what we do in Santa Barbara is require that they be screened by architectural elements or on a non-primary facade, which isn't always possible. And so far, what we have done is on new construction where they are required by the current energy code, that the new buildings in the historic district have parapets behind which they can be hidden.
Right. We may be having this come before us. That's why we're sort of just prepping. There's a particular case that's brewing, and as to whether to put them on a roof or whether to have them shielded by shrubbery on the other parts of the property. That's okay.
And I can add a little bit to that.
Please.
The manner that Santa Barbara manages the issue of photovoltaic panel installations on structures is similar to how the city of Palm Springs does it as well. He is correct that the state legislation does not allow the city to prohibit them, but we do regulate the screening and concealment of them to a certain extent. So our general rule of thumb here in Palm Springs is that if the panels are installed on any structure, whether historic or non-historic, if the panel height off the surface of the roof exceeds 18 inches, then they must screen them as they would any other piece of mechanical equipment that goes on the roof. If there was to be a solar photovoltaic panel proposal on a historic structure in which it would need some kind of screening, it would be likely that we would bring that forward as a certificate of approval to help guide them in how that screening would be imposed. But again, the city cannot prohibit the installation of these panels. And I can tell you that the most recent photovoltaic panel installation that I have seen be processed was actually on the William Holden Deepwell residence. That was just processed, I think, last week. And I think that there was a photovoltaic installation processed a couple of years ago on the Abernathy residence.
On the carports.
I believe so.
Yes, excellent memory. Yes. Yes. So
18 inches is the guideline.
That's the city's rule of thumb. It's a policy, right?
Dick, is that it? Okay. I'd also just like to add my compliments to code enforcement and how quickly they responded to the two issues that were prevalent at La Plaza. They responded within a few days, and both of those infractions, if you will, have been cleared up. And on La Plaza, again, I mentioned it in the recap of the minutes from April, but I really think that this board did an excellent job with the new restaurant going into La Plaza to allow and encourage the adaptive reuse of that bungalow, yet maintain what's important there in the character. And Todd, you fought for the doors, and I had been by there recently, and it would have really altered the character had those doors just become, glass commercial doors. So I thought we did an excellent job on that. So again, my compliments to code enforcement also. Ken?
And also, an item that you may want to take a look at is there was a certificate of approval that the board processed well over a year ago now, I believe, to convert an existing window into a door that was
Yes.
required for exiting from a restaurant that was a soon-to-be-opened restaurant.
Yes.
That restaurant is now open. It's called, I think it's called Grand
Times?
Central
Oh, Grand Central, yeah.
Cafe or something like
Yeah.
that. And I actually was in there, and they serve great food, but I also noticed that the door that they put in was very much in keeping with the character of the building.
It
So
really was an excellent door.
another of those where your involvement led to a good solution in terms of the adaption of an older building to new uses.
All right, excellent. Please,
A
Linda.
question of staff. So, just so I'm clear, the Norte pulled their application. Can they walk over and get a demolition permit today? They can't?
Not to demolish the entire structure.
Okay.
Not a demolition
That's what their
permit,
application
Linda,
was that they
but a
just withdrew.
remodel permit.
Remodel. So,
They don't have drawings for a remodel permit.
so the remodel would allow them to take all the walls down and maybe leave up the fireplace?
Well, no, there's a specific definition in the Historic Preservation Ordinance that defines demolition. And you should take a look at that so that you understand what that definition is. But it basically involves the removal of the entire exterior envelope of the structure.
That's the demolition.
That is a
But if they get a
demolition.
remodel, what is that definition?
There isn't a definition in the ordinance for remodel. The definition in the ordinance is for demolition.
Okay,
So if you remove the entire perimeter envelope of the building, it's defined as a demolition.
okay,
If they do something less than that, it's not.
okay.
I'm not trying to be ambiguous,
No,
but
no,
that's really
fine.
how it works.
I just want to understand
Yeah.
what they can and what they can't do now
Right.
that they've pulled their application.
In
I
the-
want to be clear.
Right. In the example that was shown on 220 West Hermosa Place, a garage was shown on the drawings to have been retained, and there were several walls of the exterior envelope that were shown to be retained. And the casita.
No, on that property, the only thing that's left is part of the casita and a wall that's maybe 6 feet wide that's propped up with.
That's gonna fall down. That's not even part of that was supposed to be retained. That's just an accident.
So the whole main house, there's
gone.
not a stitch of
Nothing.
anything.
No.
And
It's-
they applied for a
Remodel.
remodel.
And you know, Linda, this comes back to exactly what you're saying. If you look in the overall scheme of this, if it's a $44,000 fine, that is nothing.
Nothing.
That's the bathroom fixtures. You know, it's irrelevant.
So basically what I'm getting at is they can apply, or they can do a remodel and the whole house can be gone.
Yep.
What we saw today could be gone.
We got it right in front of us. So, but I thought there had to be some little something left, no?
The sink.
Yeah, but there's no wall left except the casita is separate from the main house. There's part of that left and a section that's 6 feet, well, that's gone now. So,
I guess my question is then, how did they essentially demolish that house with a remodel permit? If there is nothing left of the exterior envelope of the structure?
I don't know the answer to that. I have not been involved with any of the field inspections on the construction or demolition of that project. So in the photos that Member Kaiser has put forward, I didn't see them as they came around, but it sounds like more was demolished than what was on their drawings. I don't know.
So.
And to that point, you'd referenced the John Porter Clark house from about 4 or 5 months ago. Similar situation, so.
Well, but more was left of that house than was left of the Hermosa house. At least we had maybe 40% of the John Porter Clark house left. But, so can we find out what happened on Hermosa? I mean, I don't mean to add more to your workload, but I'm concerned.
What do you want us not to do so that we can spend time on Hermosa?
I mean, just an update as to whether or not somebody in a appropriately demolished a house.
We'll send that over to code enforcement, because they would be the
Okay.
ones who would investigate.
That's great, thank you.
Could you
Thanks.
provide us a set of the working drawings under which they received a permit?
We will request building and safety to do that.
Thank you.
You have the
And
image.
I can come in if you want me to
Yeah,
take a look at them.
that would be helpful. You do have the image that Ken sent around in terms of the plans that were submitted.
But I'd like to see the complete set of plans to see what
Yeah.
was permitted and whether they complied to what was permitted.
Yeah, so you can go ahead and go to the building and safety department counter, and they can pull those plans for you. Yeah.
Mr. Lavoy.
I had handed Mr. Lyon a document from Santa Barbara. I know you're tired of hearing about Santa Barbara, but they're tired of hearing about Palm Springs too. That was the second cultural landscape study that we had seen, and it's done by one of the area's better historians. This thick. It's a block area of Santa Barbara under which a development permit had been requested. And this documents what happened on that block from when there was nothing, the Chumash arrived, and then in increments of how the town developed with insurance maps, aerial, old sketches, photographs, and it produced an amazing document and fully documented almost every building on that block and when it was built, and then talked about how the block changed over history from agricultural to now 2- and 3-story apartment buildings in post-war, attenuated modernist style, which was one of the best languages I've ever heard. These people are wonderful word crafters. And the end result of all this was we have this document, and this document states that, yes, this developer can build what they want to on this site. So the importance then becomes, because this is all we're going to have left. Some old buildings, pretty nice, are going to get torn down. And this document is the only thing we're going to have left. And this goes into the archive. That's what I was looking for in this document. And that's why these documents are so important, is because they have to be accurate, they have to be unbiased, and they have to be complete. Otherwise, they're worthless. And that, I mean, and that's why they're important. And yes, this house will be gone, one way or another. It'll either burn tonight, or they'll get a remodel permit, and there'll be nothing left. And that happens when they don't rise to the level of significance, or they've been so compromised. So you have to accept that some things are going to get torn down, but you have to keep a record of them, so that at least we can remember the history. That's my soapbox. Bye. Thank you.
Amen. Any other board member comments? No? Vincent, please.
To staff and to the board, there's been a lot of discussion today about definition of demolition, and also the need for a definition of rehabilitation. I would suggest to staff that we all currently work to craft some new ordinance language about those two things. I know in San Francisco, demolition was a huge issue, and for a long time, we worked with the city attorney to craft language which said that 75% of existing walls shall remain in place. You can remove 25% of the walls to do an addition. There is language around the state about the definition of demolition that in other historic preservation ordinances that we need to look to, because obviously today's example and other examples shows that there's a trend towards more demolitions because of the scarcity of real estate and the price of real estate and the need to build new structures on existing sites. Recently, Ken sent out a environmental mitigated negative deck, which I kind of like to look at more closely. It's in the historic tennis club neighborhood, and I'm wondering if the actual site is an archaeological site that they're proposing to do the project on. I didn't really get to look at all the negative deck for that site, but it seems to me that there are archaeological findings for that site that might be disturbed. I don't know.
Member Marsh, I haven't had a chance to review that document. I forwarded it to you. It's part of the standard CEQA evaluation that the city does in a project of this nature. This was a particular site that several board members had identified early on, that it had been discussed with the tennis club neighborhood organization, that this project was coming forward. And so you, one of you or two of you, had identified on this site there had been some stone ruins from early settlement on this particular site, and that was forwarded to the city's CEQA consultant. That information should be in that mitigated negative deck and initial study. My reason for forwarding it to you all is that as a site on which there was a potentially historic resource identified, it's one that the board should take a look at that CEQA document. And again, it's a public comment period that you can offer comments back to the city on that document, asking questions or making comments about what's in the content and the evaluation and recommended mitigation measures therein.
And then just going a step further on that, in terms of mitigation measures, if it's found that the proposed project would impact the historic resources, then that may lead the Planning Commission relative to taking action on the project. So again, it's a wonderful thing that you all identified that there were issues that needed to be investigated as part of the CEQA analysis. We appreciate you doing that, and so they've addressed that as part of this CEQA review. So again, thank you.
All right, Vincent, is that it?
Well, finally, the La Plaza, in reference to other committee members, the question is, when might we have another meeting with Councilman Roberts? I was surprised to understand that a contract has been let with Gensler and Associates for the project, and that the subcommittee, I didn't have any knowledge of that. And they've done, they're already an initial review of the site, so I wonder how the subcommittee inputs into the work that Gensler is doing currently.
I'll pretend to be able to answer that. If I understand correctly, Gensler is doing just research on bringing it up to code, electrical, plumbing, ADA, and that no restoration has yet been discussed. This is stabilization? Help me.
It's a facilities conditions assessment and basically a study of the capacity of what the current building has the ability to support.
Okay.
We can provide a copy of the Gensler proposal that outlines the scope of services that they've been tasked with. The board would like to see that.
But I would certainly say that the subcommittee on La Plaza would be involved at maybe the next step or
Yep.
Yeah. Any other board member comments? We're all good? All right, staff, please.
Just following up on the Racquet Club tour, there were 3 of you who were unable to attend those tours. What I'm going to do is forward the contact information for the architect, who can then arrange for you to visit the property. One of the issues is that they do need to have a handyman, I guess, to take down the boards from the buildings themselves. And so he may ask that all 3 of you meet at the same time, just so that they can save that expense in bringing someone to the site to do that. But I'll forward the contact information to you all if you wouldn't mind getting in contact with him and letting him know what your availability is, and he'll set that up for you. Second thing, we've talked a little bit today, I think, about demolition. And so I had been through my notes. I thought we had appointed a demolition subcommittee in emailing Gary and Dick. Apparently we did not. So I need up to 3 members, Mr. Chair, to be appointed to the demolition subcommittee. What we will be doing is I've got the contract city attorney, Mr. Jim Priest, who serves as the contract attorney for the Planning Commission. He'll be working with the subcommittee on this. In addition, the Planning Commission has appointed a subcommittee on the issue of demolition that they'd like to have work with your subcommittee as well.
Excellent.
2 topics that he'll be working on. Number 1 is the initial concern that we had relative to having an entitlement in place before demolition can be approved. And then the second issue will be relative to the remodeling that we've discussed in great detail today. So those will be the 2 issues that the subcommittee will address, and any others that you may come up that are related to those topics. So, Mr. Chair, if you would go ahead and appoint members.
Okay. I'm happy to take volunteers. Dick, thank you. Mr. Lavoy? Okay, so we have our subcommittee. Thank you, gentlemen. Okay. Lavoy, Hayes, and Burkett. So it's certainly, and again, in reviewing the minutes from the July meeting, it's, you know, it's coming. We're making progress on something that we've been talking about now for quite a while. So would you immediately convene the committee, subcommittee?
Yes,
to begin
we hope to begin within the next week or 2.
Okay.
One of the things I'm hoping is your availability is such that we can get you together. I know it's been difficult getting you on tours in the past, but when are you here in town?
I am here this week, and then next week and every other week I am out of town on
Okay.
Wednesday and Thursday.
Mr. Hayes, when are you here in town?
Yeah, because I was up in Sacramento when the fray, that whole week, last week. Oh,
So you're getting recorded.
As far as next week, Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday?
Okay, Fridays are out
Oh,
for
that's
us.
right. I'm
So
sorry.
Wednesday or
I
Thursday.
forgot. So, Wednesday or Thursday.
You are?
I am here. Yeah.
Ah,
Oh,
okay.
you're not, oh, I'm
No.
sorry. Oh, I
Right.
thought you were here.
That will
Oh,
be the following week.
oh, I'm sorry. I misunderstood. So, the week of the 21st.
I will be here.
Okay.
Oh, I misunderstood.
Dick?
I'm not here
Morning.
Wednesday, the 23rd.
Morning, noon, or night.
I'll
be there.
So would it be
cancel.
possible to establish a meeting right now? To, let's say, on the 23rd?
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have the attorney's schedule,
Understood,
so I
okay.
can't schedule him.
All
What
right.
I'll probably do is have Terry contact you and work with the attorney on a meeting time.
And then I would ask that we sort of future agendize a recap, a discussion as we go forward, so it sort of stays on our, stays on the table, so we can kind of chat about it.
Yeah, what you can do is have your subcommittee members report at the end of your
That's
agenda.
it, thank you, perfect, that's what I want. A subcommittee report at each of the future HSPB meetings until such future date that it no is longer necessary. All right. Any other staff comments or staff reports? Ken?
Just briefly, I had a clarification and a discussion with the city attorney on Mills Act agreements. Until now, our Mills Act contracts have been written only to qualified properties that are defined as those that are Class 1 historic sites. State legislation allows that a Mills Act contract would be qualified on any property listed on a state, local, or federal register of historic sites. The city attorney clarified that we may process Mills Act contracts for properties that are listed on the state or national register, but not necessarily that are on the city's Class
Interesting.
1 list. So this is a good piece of information for those people who have sites that have been listed in the National Register, but which, for example, are not listed on our listing of Class 1 sites. The France residence, for example, is one of those. There are several that PSPF and other organizations have been nominating for the National Register, and those projects and properties have been getting on the National Register, but they have not been designated as Class 1 historic sites. Those types of sites are now eligible in the city of Palm Springs for Mills Act contracts. So that's a good piece of news.
Excellent. All right, so just prior to adjournment, we're going to leave our badges here now that we all have nice new badges. So everyone, please leave it with your nameplate, and then we'll have them again. Vincent, just put it with your nameplate there so it gets, there you go. So, okay, anything else? Board, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.